Welcome to Tanked Up, the podcast about video games and beer. I'm Ben. I'm here with Aadil.
Hey!
Hey. The two of us rolling straight in off the back of episode 150.
Yeah, now we've got a lovely palindrome.
Yay. Nice. So, episode 151. Not so special episode. But still special because we're here. Hooray!
Yeah, I was saying, hey now, they're all special.
That's true, it's true. Our roving reporter in the field, Lucy Ewart, is out this evening because she is at a Tiny Rebel event because it's their birthday, 7 years. Happy birthday, Tiny Rebel.
I was going to make a joke about how it was a Rebel event that's small, but I'm honestly exhausted and couldn't get there.
Let's move on to the beers we're going to drink this evening. Aadil, what are you starting with?
I'm continuing Korea month.
Yes.
Didn't have a chance to go anywhere, but knew I had some Korean beers in the fridge. The Booth Brewing. It's a milkshake IPA. I cannot pronounce the top words. Literally, Gemsugang-san?
Okay.
Means rivers and mountains as if embroidered on silk. It's a traditional figurative expression referring to the beautiful Korean landscape. Combining the rich, creamy mouthfeel of a milkshake IPA with the natural tartness of blackcurrant, the fruit character in this New World hops is accentuated, resulting in its beautifully balanced, luxurious hoppy beer. And it doesn't tell me what the hops were, but it is 6%, and it's this gorgeous can,
Yeah, it's really nice.
sort of a little Sergeant Peppersy, or no, a Yellow Submarine. That's what I'm thinking of. Sorry.
Nice large cat on there as well, hugging a building or a tower of some kind.
Yeah,
that's good.
but I don't know if you noticed on the top of the tower,
Ah.
there is a weird Cyclops with three finger spike things on his head. Thing. That guy.
Nice. You pour that. I'll tell you what I've got. So, we didn't have an episode last week. I was away for the week. And I went down to Weymouth, which I do quite often. And because Weymouth is a nowhere town, it doesn't have a bottle shop.
What?
So, I went back to the local Londis. I think I've mentioned it before. I've been there before to pick up some beers. They've got a good selection. A lot of, I don't know whether Londis are Manchester-based company, or whether they just have a very good relationship with, with the Manchester distributor. But a lot of Manchester-based breweries in Londis. So I've got one of those that I'm going to drink tonight. But I'm going to start with a beer called Corbel, which is an IPA, 5.5% from Eightarch Brewing Company, who are from, I think it's Wimborne. Yes, it is Wimborne, which is just up the road from Weymouth, where I was. So a local brewery to Weymouth. And this just says it's their signature IPA, showcasing some of our favourite American hops that give massive tropical aromas. They had about 4 beers there, maybe 5.
Okay.
But I thought I'd just try that. I've never had anything from these guys before, so I'd try an IPA.
Solid, decent benchmark test.
Yeah. Only a little can. Unlike sort of the most of the offerings that were in the Londis.
Yeah, I mean, this one's also, for the audio listeners, only a regular 330 ml can as well.
How is yours? What's it looking like?
It's reddish in tone, quite dark, hazy. You immediately get that blackcurrant tardiness. It's a little sweet on the nose, but mostly it's that hit of blackcurrant.
Yeah. Looks super... I mean, with the head and stuff, it makes it look a little bit sort of like crisp. It kind of makes it, at least on the video, what I've kind of seen, it's a little translucent. It makes it more like maybe like a kettle sour or something like that, with that red colour, with that really vibrant sort of
definitely
red or purpley kind of creeping through there.
Ooh,
I'm assuming it's probably a little thicker, perhaps.
Yeah, I was gonna say it is thick. It's got this. It's not too velvety in texture. Like it feels thick, but it doesn't stick and linger. It doesn't coat. Not that much. Just maybe a little bit. I mean, that blackcurrant is there the entire time. Not like in your face. Just that's the primary taste.
Yeah.
This is like an eye-opening, crisp, Very crisp beer.
Eye-openingly crisp. It's that sort of.
Yeah, it's not like in your, like it's not like a bash your head in it, but like that
Okay.
tartness, like just sort of, oh right, it like
Mm.
brightens your whole mouth, if that makes sense. Just because you're like and
Yeah.
it leaves you a bit dry. But and like I think part of this is that tartness. You get
Mm.
some of the bitterness out of the hops as well, but I mean, the can's not wrong. I think it said something about like being balanced. Like I can just sort of sense the difference between the tartness and the bitterness, but they sort of dovetail really well together. I guess like the one thing I will say is mostly blackcurrant.
Yeah.
Like you're not, there's no sort of other fruity flavors I'm really getting, but it's really tasty. And like I said, it's sort of mouth brightening, but it's not like, squid your face up. Oh God, it's so tart. It's just like, holy,
Yeah.
like a burst
Okay.
of tartness. Yeah. It's a nice balance of a tarty, beer, but with again, that sort of, the rest of the beer is on a very low sort of, it's not like a spiky taste profile. It's just like,
Mm.
this is what we're doing, and we're going to fade out, and you're going to taste a little more beery elements very near the end. But unfortunately, because it dries you out, I'm going to lose that lingering flavor a lot.
Yeah, yeah. But interesting that they've kind of tried to go for, that range of different things and merge those different things together. The tartness, that kind of like that beery follow-up, but also this slightly more creamy kind of mouthfeel.
Yeah,
with it
I,
as
I guess,
well.
yeah, it's an interesting thing because usually the creamy mouthfeel doesn't dry you out. But this one does. Like it just,
Mm.
I think it's because it doesn't sort of coat. So it gives
Yeah.
you that texture, but then it all disappears fast. And I think the fact that it's bitter and tart gives you that drying out taste as well as the actual mouthfeel.
Mm.
Like I think I don't know how, now I'm like thinking on it, my mouth isn't as dry so much as I'm wanting to quench.
Okay.
So it might not be as sort of drying out as I initially thought. I think it might be that the two types of bitter, like the bitter and the tart sour, are working together for my mouth to be like, nope, need something else, need more liquid.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think if possibly if the texture was a little thicker, or like if it lasted a little longer, the liquid, you would sort of fight some of that off. But it's good. How about yours?
On the nose, it's very, very sweet. Really getting a punch of sort of like tropical fruits, but maybe a little bit malty as well on the nose. The tropical fruits and the hops aren't kind of dominating, even though they're very, very present.
Mm.
There is a lot going on in that nose. It's
It's quite orangey. It looks
reasonably
like.
sort of orangey, yeah, a little bit bronzed perhaps under the lights. The head has dissipated quite a lot, but it was quite large when I poured. It might just be, it's been sat in my fridge for, like 4 or 5 days, so it would have settled. It's
Yeah.
not like I came back today and it's been travelling or anything, so. Flavour-wise, definitely lose a little bit of that sweetness that you get off the nose. It kicks in a little bit more towards the end. You maybe lose the maltiness a little bit, but perhaps that's kind of just pulling down and balancing out the hops, because I'm getting some stone fruits definitely coming through in there. Little bit, very, very, maybe a little bit of grapefruit, very slightly. It kind of moves into this slightly lighter sort of stone fruit, which is maybe a little bit peachy perhaps. But it starts off almost with this very light bitterness that rolls all the way through it. Doesn't really get any, the bitterness doesn't kind of grow or lessen at all through it. It's just very easily sort of
Nice, stable.
stable throughout. Yeah. And whilst that flavour profile changes very slightly, I think that bitterness just backs it up really well. It just keeps that consistency
Right.
throughout, which allows that flavour to kind of to flow a little bit. It is dry. The the stone fruit is kind of what sticks around, and the bitterness that stays on the tongue quite a lot. After the kind of like the fruits have faded now, but it's kind of that first maybe tropical, slightly bitter kind of grapefruit coming through first goes into that stone fruit, and then that's what sticks with you. So maybe it's that kind of that grapefruity which is kicking off the bitterness sort of flavour, which allows it to then flow all the way through. It's very nice. It's very easy to drink. It's only 5.5%. I've already had 3 big glugs.
Yeah, I just took a big glug off mine as well, and it works really well in bigger sips actually, because you get a little more of the beer, and it's like I think the blackcurrant kicks in a little later. So having more in my mouth, I actually found that it's a little less. And maybe it's just also because I've had a few sips and I'm getting used to it. But it just like that big sip sort of made it taste more like a beer that sort of ended with this fruity finish rather than fruit the entire way through.
Yeah.
But again, I could just be being acclimatized to it.
Nice. Okay. I don't think I'm getting much more than I've described from this, so we can return to it later. So I thought I'd kick us off this week. Straight into the first segment, and I wanted to pose a question for us to kind of to discuss, and that question kind of is, what do you feel games have relied upon which maybe need to kind of disappear these days? And this can be anything that you can kind of think of, which kind of maybe needs to come out of the current sort of zeitgeist for games to maybe not use as much or lean on as much. And it kind of was spurred on a little bit from having 2 games coming out tomorrow, 2 big AAA titles, which are both, they're very different in terms of their post-apocalyptic kind of settings, but they're both post-apocalyptic kind of games in Metro Exodus and Far Cry New Dawn.
Right.
And we've done post-apocalyptic worlds quite a lot, haven't we? I mean, there's always something different to kind of do with those. There can always be futures that we haven't envisaged, which can then go to shit. To have, you could have steampunk kind of dystopian post-apocalypse kind of worlds.
We don't have a lot of.
No.
So, I
think kind of what we get is much more kind of like modern day.
I was going to say, I think
post-apocalyptic kind of world.
My biggest problem, besides just like we could try other things, is that it's like roughly now / 20 years in the future, where everything's gone wrong. Okay, so like there's a very minimal shift between the post-apocalyptic game of 10 years ago and now, because slightly different understanding of what technology is at the base state. But other than that, same games.
And same as I don't know whether it depends. I think on maybe the jump between when the event happens to when you're actually playing. So you have something like Fallout, which it's a few years after, a few decades after. Yeah, so you're stuck in that kind of like that 50s kind of aesthetic, and that's kind of what you're rolling around. And Metro, you're stuck in. A more modern day aesthetic, and yes, you're then a few decades on, and that's what you're stuck with. I think maybe Mutant Year Zero did it a little bit. I've not played Metro Exodus, so I can't attest to how well they do it. But Mutant Year Zero did it really well in that it was kind of modern day where it all went wrong. A little bit in the future, so some other things had kind of happened.
Which is standard,
But then the jump was quite large, 100, maybe more than that. I can't remember.
Yeah, and the change is quite significant.
Yes, so there's a significant change. You're not vault dweller running around. You've come straight out of the vault when it's kind of okay for you to do so in Fallout. So you're right on the cusp of kind of the changes on the new world as such. You haven't had that time to be part of a society, to develop, to then have children, for it to then be them to kind of play through.
Which makes the grounding of the society really boring. There's so much more creative things you can do when you envision, when you can write and envision, decades of change and pardon the pun, fallout of cultural fallout. And if you just make it like, well, we were either in a box we didn't change in the box magically, or this just happened 5 years ago, so we're all clinging to the same basic idea of what the world we wish the world we miss, rather than
Yeah.
this is the world we've gotten used to. Also, I mean, that's one of the things that was sort of disappointing to me. I get why they did it in the Division 2. Is that they just so Division 1 was like a terrible attack in a city, and the city had biological problems, etc. That was a nice, unique thing because it was like you are an operative going to deal with, you know, modern day Chernobyl kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then what they've done now is, oh, it all spread, and yeah, and you're in DC, but you could be anywhere because it's everywhere is chaos and broken like that. I mean, I was going to save the discussion of this as the second segment, but I've managed to segue into it. But like, just we'll talk about the gameplay and stuff later. But like the intro cinematic of like, we all lost everything and society collapsed and we all fend for ourselves, and there's like rogue vigilante people rose up to be vigilante justice people, and now there's scavengers and thieves, and like, oh, so we're in Mad Max but with a good faction. And you're an expert from the old days, and you're gonna support the good faction. Like, this is your narrative choice.
I don't think they gave a or at
shit.
least I didn't see whether they gave I don't think they gave a time difference. Obviously, it's not set in winter anymore. It's more kind of spring, summer.
I assume it's like a couple, maybe a couple few years on, but like that's the point. It's not the same.
It's not the following summer, at least. It's not sort of like 6 months later, or at least it doesn't. I mean, it could be, but they don't sort of differentiate with that. Obviously, some settlements have kind of started to appear and be built up and things, but that could happen in 6 months. That people could have got to that point. I think DC really was chosen because I'm assuming they're trying to thrust some kind of narrative in there all about getting
politics.
Power back, but is it really who are you getting power back for type of thing?
Yeah.
So,
And it's not clear that, given that like the government's collapsed, why you would go to DC when like if you wanted to sort of retake over the country, a place where there's more people, like New York actually makes more sense. Oh, but everyone's dead in New York right now, I remember.
Yeah.
But like LA or some of the other, like DC's heavily populated, but not like the most heavily.
Sure.
But yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, it was just I really was let down by that opening intro, and like it was also like thwack you over the head. But like it was just like, this is exactly. But the main reason was, oh, okay, so we're in another one of these situations. Except we'll have these contaminated zones like they were in the original one, but that made sense because the bioterrorism had just happened and it was like in the ground or whatever, or roughly, right? Now it's like some arbitrary amount of time has passed, and some areas of DC are cool and some aren't.
Yeah, it does blur it a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it blurs it in exactly the way that you were sort of pointing out with Metro and Far Cry. It's like it blurs it in the same beige, gritty, brown realism that has been like, I guess we've moved on to bitter gray realism of regular cities to people complaining that the bitter gray brown doesn't reflect the real world. Oh, it's because the world ended a few months ago. That's why it's bitter. We don't need to update our textures. We've just changed the setting to match what you were complaining about.
Well, I think things. So I can see why the games are kind of trying to push along a little bit, because Metro, you're on this train and you're traveling through Russia. So I think there's sort of you go to like the Caspian Sea, so there's a little bit more sort of like desert, and you're traveling through a year as well. So they do touch on a few. There is a color palette difference, and vegetation difference in a few of the areas and stuff. And Far Cry New Dawn that's a little bit further on than it's not the year after something happens. That's a few years on, so factions have been able to establish themselves, and it looks quite lush. But Far Cry's kind of always looked a little bit lush. They've just then made it post-apocalyptic and kept it lush and a bit more like Mad Max. Suddenly there's doors and things bolted onto the sides of trucks for people to kind of use, and that have cobbled together from like a dying society. But I think it's always just kind of like that. Oh, yeah, stuff's gone to shit. There's gonna be familiar bits. There's gonna be some different things. You know, we haven't quite had that. We've gone to a new planet. Everything's a bit sci-fi, and now it's all gone to shit. So suddenly we're already in a different.
Okay.
You know, we're already out of our comfort zone. We're already in a completely different world, experiencing something different, and now stuff has gone to shit. And if we'd have had kind of maybe, you know, like Far Cry have done, we've had a Far Cry game, and now we're having the post-apocalyptic version of that Far Cry game. If we'd have had maybe like a sci-fi game, like something like Mass Effect, and then had a follow-up game where, you know, maybe you didn't save everyone and it all went wrong, and suddenly, you know, it's a nice way to have a sequel which kind of builds on the first game but change stuff up enough.
But then I can't just send a team to scan real buildings. I mean, so when you first asked that question, I was thinking maybe open worlds.
Sure.
And then and then talking about this, I realized, one of the great reasons to go post-apocalyptic is you don't need to have all the people moving and being animated and calculated. That's a lot of resources, and you need that in an open world game, and that takes a lot out. But if I just kill everyone as a plot move, then I only have to animate 5 people, and I don't have to polish my textures. I just hit the grid button on Photoshop. But I mean, this is why I think that they're related, is because you could more easily do a fully populated game if it was more on rails than an open world game.
Yeah.
You just don't have to worry. I mean, Red Dead, from what I've seen, because still haven't played it, it's great because it's the West. There's just not that many people yet.
Yeah, pretty sparse, yeah.
Yeah, but what you were saying about sci-fi could work the same way.
True.
And I think we haven't had a hard R sci-fi AAA game in a while.
I know, sort of, Mass Effect Andromeda tried to do kind of. I mean, the premise for that game was kind of what I would want from a sci-fi game. You are going out to, or at least colonies have started to become established, and you're kind of one of these almost new frontiersmen going out to kind of build on this and help with this and stuff. I like that idea of the, as most sci-fi kind of deals with, like the unknown and discovery. You're then already building on top of people that have kind of got there and have started to establish things. So there's, there are settlements, and they can very easily build in sort of gameplay mechanics around those sorts of things. But I can't remember. There was it was in like the Starhawk universe. Was it? No, it was in the Warhawk universe. And it was called Starhawk, which was like a PS3 game, which kind of tried to meld that with then in a bit of a tower defense kind of thing, and it didn't work so well. But when I heard about that game first years and years ago, I'm like, this is the game I want. This is exactly what I want. It wasn't what I wanted, but
premise-wise,
and I still like that. I'd still like something. And I know we're seeing what other Obsidian's new game is. What's that called? The Outer Worlds. Is that what it's called? Worlds?
Fallout 5.
Yeah. That may give us a little bit of that. It may be kind of like the Wild West in space.
I mean, at least retread the same ground twice, I guess. I mean, it looks interesting. It looks like they're letting go of some of the things that have been sort of stuck on Fallout, and retaining some of the nice things. Yeah,
I think that's just what I want a little bit more of. If we're going to do, we don't need to do any more post-apocalyptic games. Just we've had a lot. But if you're going to do one,
do it
make
differently.
It interesting. Do it differently. Try something that you're not just going to get somewhere else. Okay, fine. Like Metro is slightly different to The Division. In that they're different perspective kind of shooters. You're maybe doing things a little bit different. One's a bit more stealthy. One's a bit more loot driven. Slightly different iterations on kind of the same thing, really, or the same central mechanic of shoot those dudes. I'd like to see maybe post-apocalyptic not revolving around having to shoot those dudes as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's like if you're going to retread the same sort of recent post-apocalyptic thing, do something else differently. Like, but the fact that the gameplay and the premise. I just realized my laptop's got a crack in it. Wonder when that happens. I thought it was a hair, and I was like, nope. Sorry. It's only the weird hinge part. I'm sure it's fine. Famous last words in the last 2 weeks of your dissertation. Yeesh.
Back up.
Yeah, do something else differently. Or like, I was just thinking, you know what's a post-apocalyptic, or a pre-apocalyptic, an apocalyptic game that was a unique setting, a unique take in a familiar setting-ish, was Massive Chalice from like a few years back. The idea was the blight was coming and you were fucked and you had to survive for 300 years roughly. And like, yeah, the setting of you somehow being in the chalice and there being two voices, that stuff, that is weird fantasy nonsense garbage that was for the narrative.
Yeah.
It didn't really do a lot. Could easily get out of. But the idea of like the medieval kingdom and having the world slowly eating away and being invaded. I mean, that and having it almost inevitable and you just having to survive. Forget about the SRPG mechanics of it. Was a really interesting setting because it was kind of like, like the middle ground of all these things. It's like, hey, the world is about to end, but you have some time to deal with it, but you're kind of fucked. And we're also a medieval world. We have some idea of magic, but not a lot. And you don't normally get that because we think like sort of fantasy settings are like medieval, and so therefore the world can't end because the world is now. And you're like, no, that's not how this works. But that's kind of how it feels. It's like a lot of times when we get these fantasy games, they're not big world-ending things, let alone the world has been like crushed by, like Sauron won, and now we're dealing with the fallout. That would be interesting.
Yeah, it would.
But we don't do that because that narrative is the heroes win. Because it's like these archetypal things, but nothing prevents you from doing that type of thing. Get like, sure, every story's been told, but reshuffle the deck a couple times and flip whatever cards you get and like just figure it out. Like that would be interesting. Like
it would definitely
like a swords and bows division type thing with like orcs and goblins. Like the world's collapsed. You're hiding in the cellars of it, like in the backwaters of some like ancient town. And you have to retake the castle so that you can, I don't know, like that would be interesting. Same sort of sparse people, right? And there's bad zones because of magic, whatever. You could reskin that game and make it interesting.
Well, again, why The Witcher worked quite well, because it could be sparse. You were in sort of this fantasy medieval time, so there were just swathes of farmland or forests or hills and stuff, so you didn't need that the populated sort of world to have to deal with. Again, not a post-apocalyptic setting, so we can
but like and in the world at some other time is basically what I'm saying. And you're saying maybe some other planet, and I think both of those work.
Oh, completely. And I think as well, I'm sort of saying a little bit like, move out of the comfort zone a little bit, because yes, we might not go for shooting as such, but we may remain in that kind of like that action game kind of area. But I mean, something like no one's going to make this game, but if you had like Life is Strange was relatable because of the setting and the characters, but something like that, something which is maybe a bit more narrative, a bit more dialogue based, that's kind of revolving around that, how people live in that society, and get through and are able to and you can have a big bad that appears and you've got to do something about it, and whatever. And
small bads are
okay. The whole fucking joy of fiction. Do what the fuck you like.
I was like, the problem then is you'd have to pay for writers.
That's true. We could get onto the topic of the issue between gameplay versus narrative, but I think that might be an episode, a whole episode.
Yeah, that's a robotic horse we flogged to death.
It certainly is. Yeah. So Kind of, is there anything else off kind of like the top of your head that you think maybe has been a little bit done to death that needs to kind of either go away or change a little bit more?
I mean, again, I like open world games, but I think the reason why I said that, one, because it dovetailed with what you said.
Yes.
And I think technologically that's sort of, people expect it a little bit, and also the best way to do that, again, I think is to depopulate the universe. But also it's just like, I didn't like GTA 4 so much. It was small. I mostly just didn't like the narrative arc of the main character, right? But there was a narrative arc. Like, that was a narrative game.
Yeah,
and it was an open world game. And it worked.
Yeah.
And then when they made the city really big for GTA 5, they figured out, oh, if we have 3 characters who live on the other sides of the city, that'll work too.
Mm-hmm.
Some people aren't a big fan of the way the storytelling worked, but it's clearly a story. Like, the storytelling worked in the sense that the story was clearly being told, and it wasn't sparse.
Sure.
And I think, like, you don't need the biggest map such that you can't put people in it because you're rendering too many things or whatever. And I honestly good level design is key, and some of that is lost in sort of the open world thing, with the exception of maybe like the way Hitman 2016 does it, because the whole point is that, like, that those are well designed levels, even though they're big. There's still also pockets compared to like these other games. But like, I'd like to see more of that, where they've either thought really well about a smaller layout, and the point is that you have then the freedom of movement is a point of gameplay, not just a like generic.
Completely. I think it's one of the, not quite to the same extent as Hitman, but I think it's one of the things that the new Tomb Raider games have done very well, in having those kind of that linear gameplay within that pocket of a larger area to be able to explore and approach how you want to. I think from what I've read, at least on the Metro Exodus reviews, Metro is a little bit like that as well. You've got pockets of bigger open areas, which you're then linked to by much more narrative-driven, linear kind of corridor elements. Which I think is really good. I think it was a really nice kind of mix of sort of like the two different things merging together in Rise of the Tomb Raider from very recent memory. So I'm really looking forward to kind of how Metro Exodus kind of do that. But I think I'm very similar with you. It's not maybe open world fatigue. I'm happy to go and play another kind of open world game. It's maybe just kind of open world boredom, perhaps. It's just a bit more kind of like, I'm not tired of these games. I could just do with something else.
Well, I think a big part of that boredom for me is that these worlds are just empty and boring, and there's no point. A lot of the times, like the last couple of Assassin's Creeds I poked at were like, well, yeah, I could wander, but why would I bother?
Yeah.
Like, I don't like these games where there's space for the sake of space. I mean, to be honest, like, I've only poked at Just Cause 4 a little bit, but like, it's bigger, but I didn't have a problem with the size of Just Cause 3. It was huge, and I could do the mayhem.
Just Cause 3 jumped up from Just Cause 2 as well, hadn't it?
Yeah,
by quite a large amount.
Yeah, it was one of the biggest games, I think, at least whenever that record is. Same thing with like Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon TM, Tom Clancy's TM Ghost Recon's Wildlands. I used to have that down pat. That game, as soon as you beat an area, there was no point to come back to it. So it was like huge, but not in a like, kind of just sucked. I only beat a few areas before giving up on the game. But it's just like, well, what's like, yeah, some guys might respawn sometime, but like, you've done all the missions in this area, it's basically just grayed out. And because of difficulty, there's still kind of a linear path. Like, I would rather you just spend more of those resources instead of having to like do these huge renders, etc., and give me a tighter story than the one you gave me, which was like, yeah, you can attack any of these guys, except not really, because the weapons available in this place means that you kind of have to can only live through the next place. Like, don't do that. Either give me the giant stupid map and have it a giant stupid map where I can do whatever I want in whatever order because that's the game you designed.
the
But then
point,
make
yeah.
the story easily mapped to it, or give me like what was it? I want to say The Club. That's not right. What is that fucking driving game? Number 2 failed miserably by Ubisoft.
The Crew.
The Crew, yeah, The Crew was
Yes.
sort of similar. You could kind of, but you really could had to go kind of across the states to unlock the right things in the right order to win the right races. And then you think of like Need for Speed Most Wanted, the original, not Need for Speed Most Wanted, and that was like, no, you do a few events that pop up on your map, and then you beat this street racer, and then you do the events on the pop up on the map, and you beat this street racer. I'm like. So The Crew was that game only pretending to be open world, but you were doing the same thing on a larger map. But they were saying you could go anywhere. I'm like, but I can't though. Like my car won't win this battle. You are lying to me.
Well, you could go anyway. You just couldn't do anything when you got to where you went to. Yeah.
And then it makes the travel vacuous. And I think that's my biggest problem with like Ubisoft style open world games. And like that's one reason why I'm looking forward to the Division 2. Because it's not that big, at least from what I understand. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch more zones, and I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if they like expanded the map or whatever. But like, it's clearly not like it's a huge world. You can go in a lot of buildings, you can explore a lot, but it's much more tight, and I think that's a good move.
Completely. You're staying in. Like this area, this is your level kind of.
Well, and they say that like
area,
it's a level range, and so it's like okay, I can explore, and you can like try and explore, and you had that thrill of exploration that I had like back in WoW when I was super underleveled as a rogue and was just put all my initial points in stealth and saw how much
through everywhere.
Oh yeah, how much how far could I go as a lowbie? I dinged like 3 or 4 levels on just exploring in areas I couldn't kill a thing just by like sneaking around. I found that very interesting and fruitful. That was a unique thing I could do in that large world because of the skill set that I was allowed to acquire, but I was still fucked in those areas. But like that was the thing I chose to do. But like other than that, it's like this is your zone. Next zone is these levels. You won't even get the quests until you ding. Don't come here if you want to do game. If you want to do fuck around, come here. And it's like it feels like you said in your article on the Division, it feels much more like an MMO in that sort of sense as well. Like these are your 5 things you can do in the area. A couple of them are mysteries. You might have to unlock them, but if you're in this area, you can do all of those things. Then you can move to the next one. And I think I don't need the numbers, but like the narrative guidance, whether it's over the head like an MMO or through the story, is what makes things like exploring out of your depth interesting and fun.
Completely.
Sometimes like that constriction makes the other stuff better, right?
It does. I mean, one of my favorite memories of EverQuest was, I think I was maybe 2 days into EverQuest, and I'd leveled up a little bit. And I was playing. Well, I wasn't playing with a friend. A friend played EverQuest and had played EverQuest longer than I had. So he decided, after I played for a little bit, to start a new character, and had started his character way, way, way away in that race's starting city. And he said, "Why don't you come over here? You know, experience kind of like the world and see how it kind of like all works." And I was moving through the areas and stuff. It wasn't quite the same, so I didn't have to stealth as much through. As long as you stuck to the path, you would just kind of make your way through the zone and stuff. So I was running through, and I got to the zone before the next zone, which basically the zone before I would meet him in his start.
The penultimate zone.
Yeah. I can't remember the city that he was in. Freeport, maybe. But I moved into the new zone. Big deserts, huge dunes, and I'm like, this looks cool, this is brilliant. And I'm running along, and suddenly I get to the top of a dune. I see a load of people all milling about in the middle. I'm like, oh wow, I wonder what these guys are doing. And I just think to myself, maybe I should just move on. But no, I stick around and I see what's going on. And suddenly this giant spider, like, absolute mass, just crests this dune and just descends on these people. and I was a little bit close within the range of aggro, and it just came, it hit these guys, came over and instantly came in. I was just like, oh, brilliant! I've now got to do that run again.
Oh,
like just done. But the joy that I had of that experience, like I'd not seen anything of that scale yet in the game, and it was just like, this game has so much to kind of to offer me by me exploring and going out and kind of suddenly going to another zone and seeing something that was much too high level for me.
Yeah, but I mean, so that's the thing that you don't really get in like games like GTA, because there isn't really like the idea of leveled zones. So there was so I will give Ghost Recon, too lazy to say the whole thing, credit in that, I mean, it just didn't do enough of that. Like, it made it so that, like, you could technically beat any zone, but you would kind of need to find the weapons in that zone through various, like, either finding out through the internet or whatever, or like find a good gun, and then maybe you could manage, because it's sort of the middle ground of, like, the enemies are a little tougher, but no enemy is like just outclasses you in general, so you could technically play the game in any route. There was just a lot of like implied progression that just, I guess, it just didn't do one well or the other well, and I think that's why it's was a little sour on it. Also, to be honest, there wasn't a point to exploring, because it was kind of just a giant boring map. But yeah, so I think like open world fatigue is not fatigue of the concept of open world, fatigue of like the giant stale environments,
the contents of the open world.
Yeah. No point in doing it if there's nothing to do.
Yeah, completely. It leads us quite well on to chatting about the Division 2, but I'm ready for another beer, so I'm going to crack this one open as I have it to hand. I said it was a Manchester brewery. This is from Marble.
Ah, yes, good old Marble.
It is a collaboration beer with Brook House Hops.
She's a Brook.
From Herefordshire.
House.
Ooh. This is the Cross Collar West Coast Pale. It's 5.2%. It is a slightly bigger can, 500 millilitres. And it says this West Coast style pale ale is brewed in collaboration with... It doesn't then tell me who it's brewed in collaboration with. This West Coast style pale ale is brewed in collaboration with, and the hops sourced by Brook. Oh, brewed in collaboration with, and the hops are sourced by Brook House Hops in Herefordshire. Okay, a grower and merchant committed to the highest quality throughout the supply chain, and to working direct with brewers and farmers. Brewed by Marble Brewery. Yeah, I fucked that bit up.
Fair enough.
It was written poorly. I'm going to say that. It's slightly in my defence. Aadil, what are you drinking?
I have a beer from Amazing Brewery Company.
Oh.
It is called The Dark Ambition. It is a raspberry milk stout at a 7%. And it says, a luxury sweet stout with creamy body from lactose. Ooh, let me try this again. You're rubbing off on me. I think it's because I want to say luxurious sweet stout, but it says luxury sweet toast. But, a luxury sweet stout with creamy body from lactose and delightful fruitiness from a very generous late raspberry addition with a fulsome mouthfeel and bitter roast to balance. This beer will have you reaching for more. And it just says barley, hops, lactose, raspberry yeast, water, and the allergens are in bold. It is a 330 can, and as I said, 7% raspberry milk stout.
Nice. I don't think even in the last episode where you guys drank the Korean beers, they gave many ingredients, did they?
No, and I don't know if that's because... So this is another one of those, as I was looking at the can, it says in the bottom, brewed at De Prof Brewery in Belgium. So I don't know if this is because, I mean, it's clearly canned and the packaging is probably done for an English audience, and they might just, like, cut out a lot of extra words they don't need.
Yeah.
I assume that it's a recipe swap thing. I forgot to keep my copy of the magazine from Beer 52. Oh, also, I don't know when my next one's gonna come. I wanted to cancel it, but I forgot.
The ongoing Beer 52 cancellation saga.
Yeah, this is like the weirdest type of free press that they get, I think.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, while my head settles, why don't you tell me about your beer?
Sure. It's a very sort of similar colour to
Looks
the previous beer.
a little
Maybe not
hazier,
a little hazier.
little yellow
Maybe
where you
even,
are?
maybe, maybe sort of like a deeper bronze, perhaps,
Hmm.
than the last one. I don't know whether that's just caused by a
Like
little,
much
with it
closer
being a
to
little
fourth
bit
place.
hazier.
Hmm.
Head stuck around a little bit longer. Wasn't quite as big as the previous beer. The nose isn't giving me a huge amount. A little sweet, a little fruity. Not much at all on there. What is this? 5.2%. So I've gone for the lighter beer second. I think I went for the lighter one because it was a bigger, bigger can instead, just in case. But it's got a similar level of bitterness to the previous beer. A little more, maybe dank, a slight hoppiness, a slight dankness to that bitterness kicking through kind of in the fall. And all of that runs through and leads. I'm going to have a big sip just to try and get what that end is. It's like on a bigger swig, it's slightly fruity in that floor as well. Only slightly. But it leads to a fruitiness. It leads into a very, very light sweetness. Like that dank nature of it is just flowing along with that bitterness all the way through. But there is just this really hard to grasp kind of sweetness, which is right at the end, but then lingers once the mouth has started to dry and those other things fade. That sweetness is kind of just poking through, like it's got a tiny needle that it's stabbing me with, and that is all I'm kind of getting from it. You know, it's not a big hit. I think it was a West Coast pale, yeah, West Coast style pale ale. I might ruminate slightly. I come back to you on what yours is like.
So the head's dissipated a little bit. It is, I mean, it's a stout.
Yeah.
It's dark. And I'm borrowing from the Lucy playbook because this is a pint-sized measuring cup.
Nice. That's very good.
Oh, ooh, that nose though. That is chocolatey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the sweetness and the sort of roasted malts are giving it a sort of toffee-ish smell, and then the raspberry that hits with it, it sort of smells like a raspberry chocolate, like a dark chocolate and raspberry chocolate. Lost my words there. Yep, this thesis is gonna be some eloquent. Yeah, it's really interesting. And like now that I've had a little bit, I'm getting a little more of those malts and a little bit of the roasted on the end of the nose, so it sort of stops being that sort of raspberry chocolate thing because you're getting a lot more of that burnt note as well. So it sort of kicks through. Once the raspberry fades, you're like, oh no, this is like a roasted malty affair. That's really interesting. Now we're getting a lot more of a coated mouthfeel, which isn't surprising with the milk stout. It's not too sweet, so they haven't overdone the lactose, which is my big like worry about milk stouts. It's like, nope, Big Peak is sweet. This is a very smooth beer.
Nice.
What I really like is that finishes. The raspberry sort of just is very stable. Stays basically the same mid-low level throughout, but as the rest of the beer sort of crescendos down, and then heads down, those roasted malts do just kick through.
Okay, nice.
You're left with, again, And then as those fade, you have that light hint of raspberry as well. Like it just never stops, but it's not really in the way. So you have this like the sweetness and brings the raspberry out. Then the sweetness starts to fade. Then this bitter roasted taste comes in, and then as that ebbs, you're like, oh yeah, there's that raspberry still. This is a really well balanced. What I like, so I really like well balanced beers in general. But what I really like when the balance still takes sort of a journey, like where you have peaks and valleys of the taste, rather than like this is the beer, everything works, you can taste everything. I mean, sometimes it works really well. I think like Wiper and True often have really excellent bounce throughout, with less of a huge taste curve. But when you can,
True.
right, while this is sort of like that raspberry's riding strong, and then the taste curve is going around it, but they never fight, and that's really interesting to me. This is a really tasty, interesting beer.
Nice.
And yeah, again, that creaminess from the lactose just coats the mouth a little more. I don't need to reach for it again. I am, because I'm sort of trying to be honest, I'm trying to chase a bit of that bitter roasted malty feel, because it sort of isn't there in the beginning, and then by the end it's gone. And
you want it.
Yeah.
You need it. Yeah. It's a shame I didn't get this box. I'd cancelled however long ago I did, because the beers that you've had have all sounded interesting. So it's kind of the one box I don't get is then full of interesting beers.
Yeah, but I mean I've had a handful where it's like I'm putting 0 of these on the pod because meh.
Yeah. I mean, it's always going to be the way with a subscription-based service, isn't it? Not the same with when you go to the bottle shop. Not every beer is going to hit for everybody. Not every beer is made for everybody. Same as anything, any product is not always made for everybody. Although people would like it to be. So obviously they can get more sales and things. But
sorry, I'm got too much logic on the brain, and so I was thinking of the ambiguity of the sentence of there is a beer for everybody, but is that saying there is a beer such that everyone will like it, or is it saying it is the case that for everybody there is a beer out there that they will like?
Yes, I'm going to go with the second one.
Yeah,
there's no way that there is.
I don't think the first one exists, but
there's no way one beer caters to.
So this
everyone.
is the thing I do tell people who are like, I don't really like beer. So I'm like, I bet given enough time we could find you a beer you would like. And it takes some time, but like I'm pretty good at learning people's tastes. I'm like, no, this is a beer you like. This won't like. This is one or on this menu you'll probably like this one the best, because the variety of beers we can get is so vast.
Yeah,
and like to be honest, especially in the summers with juice bombs and stuff, like like you don't like beers, you don't like the bitter, that's fine. Have this overpowered squash. I don't like it. I don't like it because it doesn't taste like beer, but I have found you a beer you would like.
Yeah. Oh, juice bombs for everybody! Hooray!
I think I'm going to start calling juice bomb beers overpowered squash. They're not JBs, they're OSs.
That's good.
Yeah.
Oh, Tanked Up coined.
Also, we're gonna. This is a great time to announce our new merch from the Tanked Up Mint. It's the Tanked Up coin. Also from the Chocolatier, the Tanked Up Mints. Chocolate mint. Yeah.
Just before we move on, this beer has has grown in flavour a little. I don't know whether it was the IPA previously, which was kind of holding it back possibly on my palate, but that sweetness that I was saying comes through a little more at the end. Is starting to, and it may just be because I've been drinking it a little more, that is sticking around a little bit more, that I am getting that sweetness a little earlier after I have sipped from my glass. So I can't tell you whether it was subdued previously or whether it now just sticks around from more drinking.
Yeah.
But it kind of enhances it just a little bit, that it's not quite just that dank bitterness now. That sweetness is there as well, just to lift everything very slightly. And I like a dank bitter beer, but I prefer a dank bitter beer which has got something else to it. And this is starting to give me a little bit more. which is nice. It'll be interesting if that runs all the way through this as well. If that sticks around right until the death of it. So.
And so I'll add that that roasted taste is now lingering more, and I think and also the sweetness is coming out a little more as well. And I think it was just because I had probably still had too much of the tartness and that very singular bitterness.
Yeah,
that went really well with the tartness. But those two tastes, I think, were probably holding back some of the other things going on with this beer from the Blackcurrant Milkshake IPA, because I'm getting the roasted flavors, which I thought were. I mean, they still sort of peak at, like, grow and then drop, but it's not dropping as much. It's not growing from as far off a place. And some of that might just be that it's just sticking around longer, but I thought it wasn't sticking around when I first had a few sips. So that's nice to hear, because I think that's one of the more interesting notes right now in this beer, and the fact that it's around in my mouth now when I thought it would disappear is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just the problem of back-to-back beers. What can you do?
Yeah, I mean, we never. Some weeks you know exactly which order you should have them in, but then if you've never tasted a beer before, you don't know what effect that's then going to have on the next one. So you may think, oh, I'll just have this pale ale, but actually it's a really deep, really bitter kind of pale.
Yeah,
and that then just contaminates the next beer that you've got coming along. It's very difficult to be able to kind of judge that.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Division 2.
We were part of the private closed beta. Yes. Because we filled out our email addresses on a website.
In fact, yes. Right. The only reason. We haven't pre-ordered it, because pre-ordering isn't a real thing. So, we should have had Lucy here for the whole debate about pre-ordering. Anyway, I'm going to let you lead this.
Oh, shit.
Segment.
Oh, nice pass there. Yeah, so I'm sure most people, I mean, we alluded to it before, the green blight, or whatever it's called, green death, something like that. The evil green smoke from New York has apparently spread across the world, or at least to DC. But society's collapsed. The government seems to be gone. The police force, military has some minor presence, but not really. And it tells us a huge thing about basically people rising up to defend those who can't defend themselves. And then you come to town as part of the JTF, which was who you are in the Division 1, and you're come to be the new sheriff in town. And it seems very much to suggest that you don't really have bosses, you're just skilled. And there are other operatives, but you're not. It doesn't seem like you're under command. It does definitely seem like the government's kind of collapsed, but there's people working out of the White House and trying to organize things. But also there's roving gangs 3 blocks away.
Yeah.
That's the premise. Other than that, it is a Division game.
It is almost exactly the same as the Division. I think it edges a little more towards the Division after, say, 9 months or a year. It's not quite as clumsy in its gameplay as maybe the Division was when it first released, which is exactly kind of what I wanted from another Division game. Really, you know, it's.
You don't want growing pains. You want more polish than on the new engine, basically.
Yes, and you know, what did we expect from the Division 2? It was never going to iterate to a point that it was a very different experience, really. It was going to be more of the same, slightly refined, with additional elements, I suppose.
Yeah, and so, like, things like your scopes now turn into scopes is a nice touch. Which, instead of just vaguely making the crosshairs closer and giving you higher damage. It feels like we played it on the PS4. It feels like, you know, I've played a little with the aiming percentages or whatever things, and it seems a little tighter in just the minor moves you can make. At least for me, last time I tried the Division 1, even when I was playing with sensitivity, couldn't quite get... It was still kind of herky-jerky, and I did all right when we played together. I had moments where I clearly was panicking and was like, nope, not shooting and aiming well. What are you doing, Aadil? Pay attention. Your job is to hit as close to head as possible. Um, that's what it means
I
to be
shot
Mr.
his toe
Sniper.
off. Oh dear.
Yeah. But yeah, and it feels a lot tighter
Yeah.
already. It's hard to tell what the final polished product will look like because boy was it janky looking in parts.
It was. Yeah. Yeah. There were times I got some screenshots of where there were smoke, some of the green smoke emanating from, I don't know, from a manhole, or it was just hovering around in the air somewhere. And it wasn't green smoke, it was 5 large blocks just
Oh,
moving
sweet.
all
I
around,
didn't get to see
kind
that.
of
That's
in
like,
different patterns with each other. And then suddenly, after 10 seconds of standing there, it popped
poof.
in. I'm like,
Yeah.
yep, that's smoke. Cool. That's,
And in like the draw distance and like texture swapping that's common in engines because of obviously resources, which is like so apparent.
yeah. But it's
Like
a
we
beta.
want, yeah. Although it's supposed to come out next month,
Yep.
not much
You've
of a
gotta-
beta.
So
I
you've
assume they're
gotta-
giving
you've
us
gotta wonder-
a super old build so they can test the networking and stuff.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. You got to wonder what build it is. I know that it was shown like an EGX, and I don't know whether the build is any different to that one. You know, that was 6 months ago now, maybe 5 months ago, something like that. So you got to wonder whether they just went right. We've got this stable build that we want to stress test the servers, and we want people to start to play it to get it into their minds a little bit more.
Yeah.
Let's release this one rather than the much more polished one, which is going to take us a lot more time to implement into the similar kind of situation that we already have this build in.
Also, if we're trying to test the network architecture, we don't also need to test like all the render, like depending on how much
Yes.
server side rendering or anything like that is done.
Yeah.
Like that's not what we're doing. But because it's so close to launch, it is a bit of a gamble.
Yeah. There is another beta, which is an open one, coming the first weekend of March, I think.
Yeah.
Which is 2 weeks before release.
Yeah.
think.
I assume that's when they're also doing larger network stress testing. It'd be a weird decision, though. Wouldn't be surprised, but it would be a weird decision to keep the same build that was pretty jank. I mean, didn't you fall through the floor at one point?
No, I didn't fall through the floor. Well,
You got stuck in the
I
floor,
didn't
right?
continuously fall through the floor.
Yeah.
I did fall through the floor up into about my waist, and then I just got stuck as I leant into cover. As I pressed the button to move into cover, he then just dropped sort of 2 foot. So yeah, he was way. So anytime I was then aiming, it was trying to look over the top, but it was just looking at
Right.
box that I was hiding behind. And then I was stuck. I couldn't move. Then it suddenly allowed me to move, and then almost instantly dropped me back down.
Yeah.
So there were issues. Yeah, of course.
So, I mean, I know there'll be points where your gun's too low level, and so the bullet sponging will really suck.
Yeah.
That's part and parcel with the thing. I mean, it's not surprising, but things like being able to turn off all like numbers falling out of people and the GPS and most of the HUD, which took 6 to 9 months to have all those tweaks in, and they were original, obviously, because it's a sequel. They know people want this. You can do that right away. I really like that. I mean, the GPS was always you were able to turn off, but a large chunks of the other bits of the HUD you weren't until later in post-release. And I think, especially if you're doing that sort of more exploratory thing, it's nice to just pretend like you're just a dude. Although, for me, sometimes I actually like the numbers falling out, because sometimes that's a clearer indicator when it's a larger enemy of how much of their health is gone. Because if they're further off and they've got a bunch of armor, it's less clear how many of those white boxes have disappeared than big number falling out of them.
Yeah.
It seems like it's the same idea. You have L1 and R1 for different sort of gadgets. And the only gadgets they allowed us to play with were drones, turrets, and rolling mines.
Yeah, are all of those... I don't know whether drones are returning.
I think drones are new.
Drones new? So the turrets are the same, apart from
All
you
the
can now get different turrets. The sort of like the Seeker roller mines or little orbs that you can sort of like roll towards people. I think they were in the previous game as well,
I
weren't they?
can't
So
remember what it was. But I mean, I like the like. I don't know because I don't remember enough of it, but also because I didn't play it after the expansions and stuff. I don't know if the aerial version of the rolling mine was there, where
not
it
sure.
rolls, jumps in the air, and then explodes. And I found that very useful because it seemed to distract, even if it didn't kill people right away. I mean, usually if there was like 4 or 5 guys there and I caught them with that firefight, we were like just had the advantage.
Yeah.
And now, having said that, I didn't try the non-aerial version of it, but it did seem like that's the one that's designed for multiple people. It took me a while because it wasn't clear how to do it to use the sniper turret because it's not auto fire.
Yes.
It basically scans the area with a laser, and then when you're targeting a person and you hover over them, you can hit L1 or like the button that you use to deploy it. You can hit that again to target that person, and then it'll just try and scroll back to them and shoot and fire. And so you kind of have to play a lot more button tapping, but it does a lot of damage. Which
And
I
can
enjoyed
imagine-
until I got a marksman rifle and realized I can't handle all those things, which makes sense because the idea would be if I'm not a sniper, I can have a sniping thing and still do my
Yes,
running guy.
exactly. I was going to say, as a kind of like a backup, I had sort of like the auto turret, which was nice because it does a little bit of crowd control. You can
It's a lot of
hover-
suppression and stuff.
Yeah, you can hover the crosshairs over an enemy and tap the button to target them, and the auto turret will then just assail them with bullets. That allows you to kind of flank and to move different positions and things, which is nice. But I can see how well that sniper turret would work if you play as I do, which is a little bit more medium to close range.
And have it further back.
Suddenly, you're looking just in front of you, and that's when you can hit the manual targeting sort of thing to then get that guy that's pretty close to you. But
yeah, I was just like, because then you can easily get the aim on them. Well, for me, it was like a couple of bosses. When I finally figured out how to do it, I was like, "You're fucked." Like, just took him out with a few shots with that turret, but it needed to be deployed in a decent place, and me to focus on just doing that because I tend not to come as close. It meant that there were less. It was less accurate. It's clearly for I throw this back there and I run up, and then it's aiming with a larger breadth. But my aiming for it, it'll be not bad.
Completely.
I think it's a really cool idea. I obviously didn't use it the right way, but that's how you learn these things.
I mean, yeah, very much. And again, it's nice that you know that the assault turret would give you, oh, not assault turret, I don't know what it's like, the full auto turret would give you a lot of suppression, especially if you want to then have a sniper rifle, that you have that kind of that backup, or at least that little bit of crowd control to stop people getting too close to you. It's nice that they have started to deviate a little bit with these builds and allow you a little more freedom in how you kind of want to back yourself up, or the build that you kind of go for, which I think for me works quite well, because I don't want to play this game by myself as I did with the Division. You know, if the two of us pick it up, I'm only going to play it when we're both available.
Yeah,
or
me too.
When the wider community of Out of Lives guys, we've got a few people who are thinking about picking it up. When people are available to play, that is when I will play. It's not the kind of game I want to play by myself. So to know that I have not just the ability to build a character, I kind of got the freedom to jump between different things as well, and to build a team or a duo, or around different things is really nice to have.
Well, and what's really nice is that like there are, as long as you're not in combat, or I can't remember the other restriction off the top of my head, but there's a couple of restrictions. But outside of that, you can have 4 presets, basically 4 loadouts.
Yes,
I think the fourth one is unlocked by a skill point, but by the time you have enough gear for that to be the case, I'm sure you can do that. And that way, I think would be so. Sometimes you just don't need a fucking sniper guy, or sometimes you like it would be so much better because it's a bunch of guys walking around in a building site. If you guys just like 3 of us took out our marksman rifles and picked off half the guys before even approaching, and like the fact that you can do that type of thing is really interesting, right?
Yeah.
In true fashion, a few of those firefights, it's like, fuck. Sniper rifle to pistol killing guy who's right in my face, skipping entirely over the like medium range gun. Yeah, so I mean, I'm looking forward to the fact that you'll be being able to switch between those. So like someday I might like some days it's way less arduous than like changing all gear to be like, let me try the medium range thing, or like I mean you've seen me in Battlefield 1, even with the like scoped rifles and stuff, I run a gun a lot anyways. And so it'd be a real advantage, right, to not have to wait to die or go to a specific place to calm down and stop, to be like, no, I see this situation. This is one of the ones where I could just be an asshole and run in and shoot some people, then duck and cover.
Weapon with me to cover that range difference.
Yeah,
I can just sub that in. Yeah, completely. Yeah, yeah. It's got a lot going for it, especially.
Plot.
Well, even
it could be interesting.
It could be interesting, but I'm not playing the Division for plot. I think that so far, from what we've experienced so far, and it'd be interesting to see if the open beta is the same. It might not be the same build, but it might be the same set of open areas and what you're able to
I'm assuming it'll be pretty close.
I'm not taken with DC at all. New York kind of like instantly had an impact, and I think a lot of this is to do with cultural touchstones, with knowing kind of, or at least having a knowledge of New York, either through entertainment products, through TV shows and movies, or
general knowledge,
just general knowledge of New York and landmarks. And you know, we've recently we had Spider-Man again set in New York, and you had that familiarity to it.
Yeah.
DC doesn't have the same feel to it. Yes, there are landmarks,
but like you don't really know how close they are or whatever. Like
I've got no idea. Yeah, I have absolutely no idea that you've got like the White House here. You know, I don't know the urban layout of DC. I don't know where things are. I have no reference to that. So that's fine. But for me, it could be anywhere, really.
Yeah, it's just anywhere with a White House.
Yeah, anywhere with a government building that is familiar, sure.
And that's one of the reasons why, because it seems like the government's fallen, why I found it curious that they put it there. One of the things I did like about the Division 1 was all the weird little things, like the echoes were a really cool way of telling you the backstory.
Yeah.
Through your Magic Watch and these holographics. And then you also had like those odd cell phone things to pick up. And I found myself stumbling into them this time, and I think part of it might have just been, well, it's a beta, so I don't need to get the experience. But I was never really getting these things for experience. I was just like, I don't care about this phone call. I just have already tuned it out and run away. Yeah. And I don't know how much of that was like, well, I only have an hour to play this. But I think part of it is just like, that was unique. And exploring and learning about what happened at the event.
Yes.
In New York was unique. And so it was like people panicking, or, hey, Josh, blah, 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 blah. Oh, my God, what's that? Like, these types of phone calls were interesting. And now they're just more of the same.
I agree, yeah.
None of that plot seemed to do anything differently, except for that one cell phone in the White House where, like, I think the fifth in chain of command is dead. You're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, there was one I picked up, which was between two... what would have been enemies to us, between sort of like two gang members. It's like, I don't want to listen to what he's saying to me. I'm gonna fucking go off by myself. Like, I just don't care. Just don't give a shit about the world. Like 18 months later, really, it was super interesting at the event.
Because it was about people you could relate to,
exactly,
in the ordinary circumstance, not like Joe Bob in this world. Well, I'm also I could have a conversation.
And they could have done it in a way. You know, we go back to our previous discussion about how do you how do you show something that is further on from the event? They could have been much more interesting sort of things to say, and yes, they're only like phone calls, and they're
But
like
that's
little
great.
30-second collectibles. But this is exposition,
And it
This
worked
is what
really
some
well
peop-
in Division 1.
It did, and it worked really well. So I don't know whether it's maybe just the ones that I've picked up so far.
I'm
not really that
hoping. I'll
fussed
still
about.
try and seek them out. And there was one Echo I bumped in that, like, normally, at least in Division 1, the Echo would play some video, and then you could, like, click for more information on certain characters in the scene, and then it would resolve, essentially. In this one, it would play the whole thing, didn't resolve, just sort of sat there, and I was like...
Yes, yeah.
And then I walked out and walked back in, and I'm like... And it re-triggered and did the whole thing again.
Yeah, the
I'm
same
like,
thing
okay.
happened. Yeah.
So like, I don't need to hear this conversation. Is this a bug? Is this just like, I don't know? Like, I thought I had some idea based on the previous game. Now I don't know. I'm walking away, and now I don't give a shit about chasing down echoes.
Instantly spoiled for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
It's
like,
got-
I mean, so one thing that I didn't get to do was the end game content. One thing I think that's really cool is the way they scale grouping. Like everyone gets normalized.
yeah.
Which is super interesting. And I mean, we only played that tutorial time I could touch the game, and but I'm interested in that because I only did a little bit of dark zoning in Division 1, mostly because I didn't have people to play with,
Yeah.
and that's a lot harder to do.
I mean, it is. I did a lot of solo dark zoning, but however, what was it? Maybe 6 months. However long it was when the survival pack came out for the division. That's when I jumped back into the division when that mode was introduced, and I jumped into the main game and played a lot of the dark zone then. So again, it's one of those that I want to experience that as part of a group, as part of a team, and we didn't get that in the beta, but it'd be interesting to see how they do that, considering it is normalizing things now. It's not tiered zones for you to kind of be able to go into. So yeah, whether that bumps up all of your gear, whether that just bumps yourself up, I don't know kind of how that really works yet.
I wouldn't be surprised if they haven't given tiered zones based on your dark zone level, but your base level is what's being scaled. Because dark zone level in the last one gave you access to some of the more lucrative areas.
Yeah.
But your base level, if you were, one of the reasons we didn't play together was because I played it mostly on PC, and then I picked it up for a song on PlayStation, but I only got to like level 10 or something before giving up on the game because we couldn't really play together when you were playing, and it took me a while to catch up because I was trying to solo everything and being rubbish with controllers. And then it was like, okay, well, I mean, I have no problem. I got a lot of enjoyment of this on the PC. I enjoyed replaying some of those missions. Fine, I'm okay with giving up on this game. I think I got my money's worth of both purchases combined, but it was like suboptimal. And so the idea that like if you end up outpacing me by the time, like it seems like you can access the dark zone within the first couple hours of play. So even if we end up out like our character levels end up being distant, which I suspect we won't try and do, but if that happened, we still have an area of the game we could play together where we can be competent and like reasonably close.
Yeah, very much. It's a nice kind of like, it's a nice touch, definitely. Obviously, it would be good to experience sort of like the whole thing with a core,
3 or
group
4
of players, like 3 or 4. Even is just the 2 of us. It'd be nice to experience the majority of what that game has to offer together. But it's nice that if things do start to drift a little bit, there is something you can do. Not just with you, but with anyone. You want to play this, suddenly someone picks it up 2 months later, you can then just be like, okay, come to the dark zone with us. It kind of like, it normalizes. We can bring you in.
We can all play together while you play the plot yourself.
Yes. So it's doing a lot that I like, and I liked the first game. So I'm already sold on the Division 2, really. What the beta kind of did was it didn't show me that there was any glaring issues or anything that I would stick away from it from. So, like I think I said, it'd be interesting to see what build the open beta is going to be on, to see whether things have been addressed and are a little bit smoother, a little bit tighter, just to know a little bit more what that final product is going to come out as. I think currently it's a bit of a given that I'm going to be picking this up.
Yeah, me too, because I'll be done.
You'll need something to do.
Well, I still have God of War,
Spider-Man,
Red Dead 2.
all the best games of 2018.
Yeah. And you know what I still haven't played, but I gave a good, strong recommendation to a fellow in the department who's like, this game is amazing. Don't touch it until you're done your PhD. But you definitely, because I told him, like, I'm sure you'll love it if you like these types of games, but I've avoided it like the plague because of PhD. And he's like, you need to play this game once you're done your PhD. Witcher 3. That's right. My AAA epic game backlog is very long.
The Witcher 3 is...
Like, you don't understand. Like, March through September / forever, people are going to be like, why are they talking about these games?
But I talk about The Witcher 3 all fucking day. Witcher 3 is phenomenal. It's one of the best games I've made.
I'm going to play that one, then the second one, then the first one. I'm gonna overturn my completionist tendencies by just inverting them.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And then if I never get to the first one, that's okay.
Yeah, you won't have to worry about it then.
So that means if a new one comes out, I just stop the second one and go to the fourth one.
Breaks the cycle completely.
Yeah.
Play The Witcher 3. Everyone should play The Witcher 3.
I'm joking. I'm just gonna play a lot of Apex, Overwatch, Fortnite, and PUBG.
You're not though, are you?
Yeah, I'm gonna put them on the PS4 and the PC, and while I'm waiting for group on one, I'll just jump on the other.
Just like sort of, like every hacking scene in any movie.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
Jump between things with your fingers, just being able to do all of it.
So I'll have keyboard, controller, mouse.
Yeah.
And so I'll be like, move the mouse, grab the controller, somehow play the game with one hand on a controller. Yeah. And then people will be like, wow, his accuracy is just the same.
Really bad.
Yep. It's like there's this joke about this guy who challenges 6 people to play a chess at the same time, and then the claim is that like I am just as good at playing with 6 people as I'm a 1, which is terrible. Loses every game.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So, listener, you should probably be hearing about The Division 2 in the near future. Maybe The Witcher 3, maybe Spider-Man, maybe God of War, maybe Red Dead 2, who knows? Aadil will be revisiting some games at some point in the future.
Also, feel like the game is just an even number. Just even number because it's divisible by 2. Too much of a stretch? Any natural number divisible by 2?
A little too far, perhaps, on that one. So,
I mean, the Division 1 was just of the same number.
That's true. So this game is.
Oh, can I call it halvesies? I'm going to call it halvesies. It's Division 2.
It's good.
Halvesies now. Yeah.
Or is it 2 over 1?
No, that's just 2.
Exactly.
There's a division in that.
Exactly.
It's just 2. The game isn't 2. It's Division 2. Divide by 2. Halvesies. I'm calling it halvesies. Ubisoft
beers for this week. Aadil, you had 2. They were both very different.
Well, they're fruity, milky things. That was the theme. Fruity, milky things. But I'm serious. Blackcurrant. It's berry milky things. Blackcurrant Milkshake IPA, raspberry milk stout.
Yep.
Very milky things.
That's fair.
I like them both. I think I'm leaning towards the Dark Ambition, though. I think that's especially when the Gemsugansen. Blackcurrant Milkshake IPA sort of left my palate. The roasted malts were coming out a lot stronger, and that gave a lot more texture, and like there's just a lot more going on in the taste, and it all worked really well. They're both really well balanced beers in the sense of there's things going on in the taste that are different, but they all work well together. Blackcurrant Milkshake IPA was more stable, like the taste curve was flat. The Dark Ambition sort of had some peaks and troughs, and that sort of allowed the raspberry to sort of ebb and flow, even though I think it was pretty stable throughout, just because the other things were moving.
Yeah,
and that roasted malts, the fact that they ended up sticking around, and so like sort of being stronger than hitting the raspberry a little bit, and then just being left with a little bit of a roasted flavor, along with that just sort of raspberry chocolate vibe on the top was very, very good. And again, not like in your face raspberry, not like in your face blackcurrant either. They're both very sort of, you could tell that's what the berries were, but they weren't balmy. We're easily recommend both, but I'm going to pick the Dark Ambition from Amazing Brewing Company.
Good. I think it's very similar for me this week that I would recommend both beers. The cross collar, the West Coast IPA from Marble was very easy. It is a pale ale. It's very light, getting a little bit of that dankness, a little bit of sweetness coming through there. But I think the Corbel from Eightarch picks it for me a little bit this week, just because it was a bit. The flavour was just a little bit more, slightly moreish. Actually, I think I would like to have that beer again over the West Coast pale, which was fine. It was very easy to drink, but it didn't do much for me really. Just a very easy drinking beer that I could have another one, yes, but I think I'd reach for the Corbel more than I would from the cross collar, perhaps, just because it gave me a little bit more, that mix between the bitterness and that kind of grapefruit beginning into those stone fruits, and that little bit of sweetness kind of worked a little bit better than the bitterness into the sweetness of the cross collar. Perhaps they were both doing kind of slightly similar sort of things, but in different ways, and the Corbel just did that a little bit better. So it's a very strong start, at least for me, from Eightarch, who at some point when I'm somewhere that actually stocks it, I will pick up again. And
right.
I did see that they had, it wasn't just an IPA, a pale. They had a couple of beers which were a little more kind of out there. I don't know how long these guys have been around for, but they do have some slightly more interesting styles as well going. So I think it would be kind of, I'd then take the jump.
Right.
I'd go for, if they did a milkshake IPA, I'd go for the milkshake IPA.
Right.
If they did some kind of spiced porter, I'd go for
I'd go for a spiced porter.
Trying to pick something a little different to see if, yes, they've got a very good IPA. It'd be nice to see kind of what they do, a little bit more flamboyant, perhaps, in a completely different sort of style.
I mean, I think this is similar to like if I go to, when I was more pretentious about coffee, I went to a cafe and I would order like a latte or a flat white, because having to pull the shot the right way and be able to foam the milk the right way, and then showed me how good they were at dealing with coffee, even though my preferred drink has no milk in it.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like, this is a way to measure it. And I think that's sort of become my stance on like an IPA with no extra like code words
Sure.
for a brewery, or even just like an APA or something like in that mid-range of craft brewery things, where it's like, don't know who you are, but I don't want to trust you doing something bonkers yet, because that could go poorly. So what's your take on this very standard craft beer entry? It's easy to do wrong.
Yep.
It's easy to do wrong. It's easy to do okay. Takes a little extra to do something interesting. And a lot of breweries can do that, but like, that's your good tried, tested, and true. And then from there, you're like, cool, they've done that. So I'll pass that test. I now sort of have some trust with them. because if you pick something bizarre and they don't do it well, you're like, well, I don't. Doesn't give me any insight on whether I should ever pursue them again. But if you pick a staple and they've not done it well, you're like, well, can't do that. Don't know if I'd bother again.
Yeah, I mean, you may then pick something slightly different. You know, if you IPA, I think is a very good kind of mid ground for kind of everything. As you say, without any other additional code words, just a solid standard IPA is a good kind of growing point for kind of any brewery. As I think maybe really like a pale ale, I think maybe is a little too light perhaps to get a flavour for what I think.
That's much easier to do all right.
It is. When a pale is done well, it is done really well. But there's so many people that kind of do pales okay. So I kind of shy away a little bit from them. But I think maybe a stout is maybe the other one that I would, IPA and stout are kind of the two that I would pick between. So, I think.
Well, I guess my problem with that is it's actually now that stouts are, I mean, especially in this time of year, but in general, stouts are being made with more frequency. Hard to find without a code word. And sometimes that changes the field a lot. I think a stout does the same thing as an IPA in the same way, but it's actually kind of hard to find just a stout with words.
Yeah, I know. We had it was last year in one of the Beer 52 boxes. I can't remember what box it was. It was just like an awards box or like a best of box, and more do a stout, which is a very good stout and like good chemistry. Oh no, what's it called? Shadow Future?
Oh, that sounds familiar.
What it is called? Is just a very good standard stout. So places do them, but as you say, they are a lot more infrequent than just a standard IPA from people. Coffee is thrown in a lot, just as something else to give it a bit of a kick to a stout. So just try and find just a standard sort of stout. But some good beers this week.
Yeah,
from each of us. So to finish out, if you'd like more from us, go to outoflives.net. Other people make podcasts. Other people write things. I've written something about the Division 2. I didn't touch on much of what I'd written in our conversation.
Conveniently.
Yes, conveniently. So go there to think about, read what I thought about the Division 2. I've also got another post up about Days Gone, which is a game coming from Sony very soon. So there's lots of things on outoflives.net for you to go to, including, Aadil, this next act.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a hiatus because the producer's swamped with his PhD thing. And he feels guilty about that, but there's still plenty of episodes to catch up on, and we are going to be putting new episodes out in the next couple of weeks. I have a co-producer / another editor on the job to help deal with that. And in March, we will be releasing 2 episodes a week to catch up on the backlog.
Oh, nice. I look forward to that. So, how do people talk to you if they want to do so?
On
the internet, not just in the street.
You can reach me at the Omniarch on all of the things except Twitch, where I'm the _Omniarch. Also, I'm the _Omniarch on PlayStation if I need to use my European account for European codes, as we figured out with the Division.
What pain in the ass that was.
Yeah.
Not so much for me. I just had to hang around and wait for you to deal with the shit you had to deal with.
What's wrong? Sorry, the cat just started howling.
Uh-oh. Angry cat. Or upset cat.
Hairball.
Nah.
Well, this is going to be fun. We'll finish recording and then I'll deal with that.
Lovely.
Oh, yeah, cat puke.
I would assume when the PhD is done, at least for maybe the Division 2, you may stream a little more.
Yeah, I might actually start doing that. Find me on Twitter, etc., and in my Nintendo Switch, and I will gladly play Nintendo games.
I am at Nova_47 almost everywhere. Contact me on Twitter or comment on one of my posts in Out of Lives if you want to play some games with us. You can also get us generally at tankedup_cast over on Twitter or tankedupcast@gmail.com if you want to email us some long form thoughts.
Follow us on Instagram.
Somewhere else. Yes. Oh, yes.
I forgot to take pictures today.
What are we?
Tanked Up
On Instagram,
Cast.
just Tanked Up Cast or just Tanked Up?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no. I figured out we were on Twitter and Gmail and matched that.
Are we Tanked Up_cast?
Oh no, we're just Tanked Up Cast. Oh, wasn't I going to change our Twitter to Tanked Up
You
Cast?
did mention you were going to change our Twitter, but I don't think you did.
No, because I wanted to make sure it was okay with you that I did that because I didn't
Funny
want to. Yeah, okay. Saying that, someone's going to have taken it somehow.
That's it. Even if you look at
I'll
it in the
figure
next
it
5 minutes, even though this is unpublished, it's gone.
Yeah.
Yep, someone's stolen it.
Yeah.
So, for another week, whilst we sort out our Twitters, we've been Tanked Up. Goodbye.
Ciao. Not kitty chow, though. That's on my floor.
Yeah.